Well, for more on the highlights of this year's Canton Fair, let's bring in Anthony Chan, former Chief Economist at JP Chase, joining us from New York. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
So let's start with what you saw as the biggest highlights and takeaways from this year's virtual version of the Canton Fair.
Well, this is a fair that's always near and dear to my heart. My dad, of course, was born and raised in Canton. Now it's called Guangzhou. And, of course, the fair started in 1957, which happens to be the year I was born. So lots of coincidences. But this fair, I think, is exciting. I think it's appropriate because it's going to allow buyers to basically sample all the products that are being offered without putting their health at risk. And not only that, but it also creates opportunities for those individuals that normally could not go will now have an opportunity to be able to participate in the fair. So I think that there are going to be a lot of positive outcomes as a result of holding this fair on a virtual basis.
And we did also see several businesses from the Belt and Road regions also participating in the expo. How might the BRI help these economies in the pandemic?
Well, that's exciting because to the extent that they're experiencing second waves and things like that, they're already at a disadvantage. To be able to do it virtually in a virtual manner is certainly a big advantage. On top of that, remember that as the Belt and Road Initiative gets basically spread out and basically is conducted, many of these countries that still don't have the full infrastructure to carry out the full effects of the Belt Road Initiative will be able to, in some sense, participate, even though the infrastructure is not in place, as this fair is held in a virtual fashion. So almost gives an early opportunity to participate fully in that Belt and Road Initiative without the full infrastructure in place.
And certainly any sort of benefit is helpful at this point. We know that many countries are still experiencing now a second wave in spikes of new COVID-19 cases. Is most of that uncertainty about the virus and the demand related to it already built into their export strategies at this point, or does it make a difference now with this resurgence?
No, I think that everyone knew that there was a risk of a second wave, and it's not a real big surprise. In fact, when we had the 1918 pandemic, the Spanish flu that, of course, started in the United States, we had a second wave. So these kinds of pandemics usually have a second wave. So it would really surprise me if many of these countries were not expecting it. But with the opportunity to do this fair on a virtual basis, it certainly makes the negative impact of the second wave a lot less negative.
Now, let's also talk about financial support for some of these small exporters and some of the comments that you have on the government and some of the banks' policies worldwide and really supporting them.
Well, I think it's very positive because these are many players or participants that normally could not have the full benefit of participating in this virtual fair, and by having these subsidies and the opportunity to do it virtually, they're able to participate. So I think to some extent it's opening up the opportunities for many of these countries that normally would not be able to participate with these subsidies and opportunities.
And we know obviously the Canton Fair isn't going to be the only expo that's going to be held online. We know that the third China International Import Expo is scheduled to start this November. But with all of these expos going virtual in China, how can they really differentiate themselves and stand out, as well as keep buyers and sellers interested if they can't have that hands-on experience?
Well, I think eventually everybody knows that these fairs will probably come back, and you'll have that interpersonal experience. I know that some of the buyers are saying they love the virtual opportunity, but there's nothing that feels as good as being able to talk to the sellers and have the sellers and buyers talk to each other and feel the product, and certainly make the decision when they're face-to-face with the product. It's hard to basically replace that. So I suspect that in the future, you're going to have some sort of a combination between some virtual opportunities, but you'll also have the in-person once this pandemic lifts, and it will end someday, I have no doubt.
And just looking ahead, what trends in China's import and export markets should we really be keeping an eye on, especially now also the U.S. confirming that the Phase 1 trade deal with China is still intact as well?
I think that one of the things that we're going to have to focus on is that China is a large economy, and it's an economy that certainly has large tentacles that spread out to all countries around the world. And this fair certainly illustrates the power of China. And I think for many, many years, these fairs will go well beyond its boundaries and continue to expand and grow. So I'm very excited that we're getting this type of opportunity to do it virtually, but I'm also excited of the importance of this fair that brings together so many people, almost 200,000 buyers and sellers together. So it's a real exciting opportunity, and I'm glad that the show is still going to go on despite the health risk that we all have to deal with around the world.
All right, always good to have you. Anthony Chan there, former Chief Economist at JP Morgan Chase.